The sky above the Pacific Theater tore open with silk and steel. Japanese infantry positions along the ridgeline went silent when the first parachutes bloomed against the morning sun. Hundreds of them. White canopies catching light like cherry blossoms scattered across blue water. Beautiful, terrifying, the kind of sight that makes your breath catch in your throat. But here's what the Japanese commanders didn't expect. They'd studied American tactics, read intelligence reports, knew the doctrine. Airborne units drop behind lines, create confusion, disrupt supply chains. Standard chaos warfare. Hit fast, scatter, wait for relief columns. That was the playbook everyone understood. The Americans who fell from those C-47s had a different script. Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto wrote in his field journal about the first encounter. His company held defensive positions near a supply depot. They watched the drop happen 3 kilometers away. Textbook response. Send reconnaissance, prepare ambush points, wait for disorganized enemy to stumble into killing zones. The paratroopers arrived 90 minutes later. Not scattered, not confused, moving in coordinated fire teams with suppressing elements and flanking maneuvers. Yamamoto described it as fighting an enemy who'd been planning this assault for months. They knew the terrain, identified strong points, exploited dead zones in Japanese fields of fire. His position fell in 40 minutes. This pattern repeated across every major airborne operation in the Pacific. Japanese after-action reports tell the same story with different details. The Americans dropped into hell and acted like they owned the place. Sergeant Hiroshi Nakamura survived an engagement near Leyte. His account sits in the Imperial War Archives. He described watching paratroopers land under heavy fire, machine gun positions tearing through the drop zone. Men hit before reaching ground, chutes tangling in trees, everything going wrong. The survivors assembled anyway. Nakamura wrote that within 10 minutes of landing, the Americans had established a defensive perimeter, identified Japanese positions, and begun systematic suppression fire. Not panic shooting. Disciplined volleys that pinned his unit while other elements maneuvered. He used a specific phrase. They fought like the ground belonged to them. Think about that for a second. You just jumped out of an airplane, got shot at during descent, landed in enemy territory surrounded by hostile forces. Your equipment is scattered. Half your unit might be dead or wounded. Everything about the situation screams retreat and survival. American paratroopers attacked. Japanese tactical doctrine emphasized defense and prepared positions. You hold ground, build fortifications, create interlocking fields of fire. Force the enemy to come to you where you have advantage. Standard military logic that worked for centuries. It didn't work against airborne forces who refused to play defense. Captain Kenji Sato commanded a reinforced company that engaged paratroopers near a river crossing. His report documented something that clearly disturbed him. The Americans landed scattered across 2 kilometers, should have taken hours to consolidate. His orders were to attack immediately, prevent organization, destroy them piecemeal. 3 separate Japanese platoons moved to engage isolated American groups. All 3 platoons encountered coordinated resistance. The paratroopers weren't waiting to regroup. They were already fighting as cohesive units despite being scattered. Sato realized the Americans had trained for this exact scenario. Dispersion wasn't a problem to solve. It was an expected condition they'd already adapted to. His company withdrew after losing 30% strength. The psychological impact shows up repeatedly in Japanese accounts. There's this recurring theme of confusion, not about American tactics exactly, about American mentality. Why would soldiers who just fell from the sky fight so aggressively? Where was the caution, the hesitation, the normal human response to being surrounded and outnumbered? It wasn't there. Private Yashiro Tanaka described an encounter that haunted him. His squad occupied a village when paratroopers landed nearby. Standard procedure: fortify buildings, prepare ambush, wait for enemy approach. The Americans arrived after dark. But they didn't probe defenses or test for weaknesses. They assaulted immediately, grenades through windows, suppressing fire on exit points, breaching teams moving building to building. Tanaka wrote that it felt like fighting an enemy who knew exactly where every defender was positioned. The speed and precision suggested extensive reconnaissance. The paratroopers had been on the ground for 3 hours. This aggressive tempo became the defining characteristic in Japanese assessments. American airborne forces didn't act like troops behind enemy lines. They acted like an attacking force that happened to arrive by parachute. The psychology was completely different. Major Akira Fujimoto wrote an intelligence analysis after multiple engagements. He identified what he called offensive mindset maintenance. American paratroopers sustained attack mentality regardless of tactical disadvantage. Surrounded, attack. Outnumbered, attack. Low on ammunition, attack anyway. It violated conventional military psychology. Soldiers in desperate situations typically become conservative, preserve ammunition, avoid engagement, wait for relief, basic survival instinct. Fujimoto noted that American airborne training must somehow override this instinct. They'd been conditioned to view aggression as survival strategy. He was right. The training regime for U.S. paratroopers was deliberately brutal, not just physical conditioning, psychological preparation for operating in chaos, drop simulations where everything went wrong, equipment failures, scattered landings, immediate enemy contact, every scenario designed to normalize crisis conditions. Japanese soldiers encountered the results of that training. Corporal Masao Ishikawa survived 3 separate engagements with airborne forces. His memoirs include detailed observations. He noted that American paratroopers seemed to communicate without talking. Hand signals, body language, minimal verbal coordination. Fire teams moved like they shared one brain. This wasn't accidental. Small unit cohesion was the foundation of airborne effectiveness. Paratroopers trained together for months, jumped together, fought together, built the kind of trust that allows split-second coordination under fire. Japanese forces often consisted of replacement troops mixed with veterans. Unit cohesion varied. American airborne units were tight-knit by design. The equipment impressed Japanese observers too. After overrunning American positions, they examined captured gear, lightweight weapons, compact rations, everything optimized for mobility. The M1 Garand particularly concerned them. Semi-automatic fire gave paratroopers sustained firepower that Japanese bolt-action rifles couldn't match. But equipment alone didn't explain the effectiveness. Lieutenant Colonel Takeo Yamada conducted interviews with soldiers who'd fought airborne forces. He was trying to understand why veteran Japanese units struggled against these Americans. His conclusion focused on initiative and decision-making. American paratroopers made decisions at the lowest level. Japanese military culture emphasized hierarchy and orders. You waited for commands from officers, acted within prescribed doctrine. This created effective coordination in conventional battles, but when fighting dispersed airborne forces, it became a liability. American sergeants and corporals made tactical decisions independently, adapted to changing conditions without waiting for orders, exploited opportunities immediately. This decentralized command structure meant paratroopers could respond faster than Japanese units waiting for officer direction. Yamada recommended reforms that were never implemented. The night operations particularly unnerved Japanese defenders. Paratroopers trained extensively for darkness combat, used it as advantage. Japanese positions that seemed secure in daylight became vulnerable after sunset. Americans moved through darkness with confidence that suggested supernatural ability. It was just training, lots of training. Sergeant Koji Watanabe described a night ambush that failed completely. His platoon set up along a trail, perfect position, waiting for Americans to stumble into the kill zone. The paratroopers detected the ambush somehow, flanked the position, attacked from behind. Watanabe escaped, but most of his unit didn't. He never understood how they knew. Probably noise discipline and patrol techniques. American airborne forces trained to move silently, observe carefully, identify threats before engaging. Japanese ambush positions often had tells, disturbed vegetation, sight lines too perfect, small details that trained eyes could spot. The cumulative effect of all these factors created a reputation. Japanese soldiers began to fear airborne operations, not panic exactly, but heightened anxiety when intelligence suggested paratroopers in the area. Officers noted declining morale when facing airborne units. Some soldiers requested transfers rather than fight Americans who fell from the sky. This psychological advantage was strategic gold. Captain Nobuo Sasaki wrote about the broader implications. American airborne capability forced Japanese commanders to maintain rear area security. Troops that could have reinforced front lines stayed back, protecting supply depots and headquarters. The mere possibility of paratroopers created resource drains. Even when no drops occurred, the threat shaped Japanese decisions. The respect shows through in the accounts. Japanese soldiers recognized they were fighting elite troops. Multiple reports describe paratroopers as special warriors or sky samurai. This wasn't mockery. It was acknowledgement of skill and courage. Warriors recognizing warriors. Private Hideo Matsumoto wrote a letter that survived the war. He described watching paratroopers land under fire, seeing men die before touching ground, and then witnessing survivors immediately organize and attack. He wrote that such men deserved honorable death in battle. High praise in Japanese military culture. The tactical lessons were clear but difficult to implement. Japanese forces needed better small unit training, decentralized command, aggressive mindset regardless of circumstances. But military culture and resource constraints prevented adaptation. By the time these lessons were documented, the war was already lost. American paratroopers proved that elite training and aggressive psychology could overcome tactical disadvantage. They dropped into enemy territory outnumbered and surrounded. Then they attacked, and kept attacking until they won or died trying. Japanese soldiers expected chaos and confusion. They got precision and violence. The accounts describe an enemy that refused to accept the limitations of their situation. Paratroopers who hit the ground fighting and never stopped. Units that turned disadvantage into opportunity through sheer aggression and skill. That's what Japanese soldiers thought of U.S. paratroopers. They thought they were facing men who'd been born behind enemy lines, who belonged in chaos, who thrived when everything went wrong. And they were absolutely right.